This show is sponsored by Sevi, answering all your commercial real estate needs. Sevi is the first commercial real estate company committed to the 4 C's: commercial real estate, community, content, and culture. Go visit Sevi at Sevi, SEVI, properties.com. Again, SeviProperties.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and I have a very special guest for you today. We have Carlos Talamante. Carlos is Senior Vice President and Private Client Advisor at Bank of America Private Bank. Welcome to the show, Carlos.
Thank you for having me, Otto. I'm excited to be here.
The pleasure's all mine. Before we get started into your sort of personal journey, I like the audience, just to get to know what you do. Obviously, everyone, I'm sure, in the U.S. have heard of Bank of America, but what's your role there with the bank?
So like you said, I'm a private client advisor here in the private bank. And the private bank, you can think of it as a bank inside of Bank of America. So we have access to all 8 lines of business. But for the past 200 years, the private bank has been advising high net worth individuals, families, endowments, foundations, and institutions how to manage, preserve, and grow their wealth, and ultimately pass it on to the next generation. So we are deeply embedded in everything our clients do, and we take a very consultative approach.
Nice, nice. Are you originally from this area, the DMV?
No, so I'm originally from Colorado. I grew up in Colorado. My family is from Mexico, but I moved to Denver, Colorado when I was 6 months old. So Latino through and through.
So you were born in the US or Mexico?
I was born in Mexico. So I was born in Mexicali, in Baja California Sur. And to any fellow Mexicans who are listening, I am technically a cachanilla, which I'm very proud of.
So you said you came to the States when you were 6 months?
Yes, yes. So my parents, we moved to Colorado when I was about 6 months old. And so, it's interesting for people like us. I think we end up in this weird zone where we don't necessarily feel Mexican, but, we don't necessarily feel American either.
Uh-huh.
But yes, I've been here my whole life. I've lived coast to coast. I've lived in, let's see, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, California, New Jersey, and now Washington, D.C. So literally coast to coast.
Wow, a lot of moving around.
Yeah, yeah. So New Mexico for undergrad, Utah for my first job, San Francisco for another opportunity, and then I moved here to DC. So my husband's a federal prosecutor with the Air Force, and so he was stationed out here at Andrews Air Force Base in the Pentagon. So we made the move out here, and we love it. Hopefully, we stay here forever.
Oh, nice. So you grew up basically in Colorado all through high school until you went off to college, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But don't ask me to go skiing with you. My parents always joke that Mexicans we don't ski, but it's a ton of fun. So.
It's so funny about Mexicans or even just Latino skiing. I think what was it, 2 summers ago? I took for the first time. I have 3 boys. We went the whole family here skiing here locally to a place in Virginia. First time, I went skiing in all of my life, and I think my wife had gone a few times, but also first time for my children. And I was like, maybe it's not a thing for me. My kids loved, especially my little one. He loved this whole the skiboarding, snowboarding. I'm sorry, snowboarding. And but yeah, maybe it's not a Latino thing. I don't know.
That's interesting. Well, there's a lot of people here in DC who are trying to expand the kind of stuff that Latinos do. So the Latino Executive Network recently hosted a polo match, which for a lot of us was like the very first time even going to a polo match. And that we realized that one of the top players in the world is actually Mexican, and he was able to join us. So, I mean, never say never.
No, of course, of course. I agree with you there. So growing up in Colorado, if I can just briefly take you back there, during childhood, what were you into? What did you like, Carlos?
Man, I think my parents were always very good at kind of getting us out into the outdoors, kind of exercise, hiking, camping. But in Colorado is very different now than it used to be, right? Like now there are about 10 times as many people living there. But I mean, growing up, I mean, all the other stuff that, kids are into, right? Like TV, reading, school. I love Colorado. Maybe one day I'll move back, but I mean, a special place in my heart for sure.
Do you have a favorite TV show?
Oh man, right now, actually, so How I Met Your Mother, I think is my comfort show. So I'll go back and watch it from time to time. There's nothing else to see.
Okay, okay, nice. So you said you finished high school in Colorado, and then you said you went to New Mexico for college undergrad?
Yeah, yeah. So I was originally a petroleum and chemical engineering double major when I was in college. And so I did that for a few years. And then I actually was able to do a congressional internship here on the Hill through the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. And it was for then Representative, now Senator Lujan. So I think coming out to DC as a young Latino, kind of experiencing the power of public policy, of finance, of economics, really shifted my worldview, right? So I come from a family of engineers, but I decided that that was not for me. In the process of being here, I actually met the director of what was then the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton University. So I went there for a summer. I had a wonderful fellowship there, went back to school, and I actually transferred to the University of New Mexico to study finance and economics.
And this was for grad school?
No, this is all part of my undergrad.
Oh, all
So
this. Okay, so you
yeah,
switched to
very
major.
last
Okay,
minute.
got it. Got
Yeah,
it. Okay.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So very last minute change. Parents were not necessarily on board, but I think it worked out perfectly. I think I found something and I was very passionate about, which I'm very thankful for.
Originally, Carlos, what made you decide engineering and then why the switch then to finance?
Yeah, so growing up, like my dad was a computer engineer, all of my uncles are engineers, and I just thought that that was really the best path for me, right? I think as a young immigrant, as I'm sure you can understand, the first thing that you think about is like, well, what is the career path that is going to help me provide the life for my family that I want? In engineering, especially petroleum and chemical, are known to be pretty lucrative professions. And so while I enjoyed, I mean, I love numbers, I love math, it's something I get to do in my day-to-day life. It was not necessarily what I wanted to do for my whole career.
Hmm.
So rather than kind of invest that time and decide to go another direction, I said, you know what, I'm just going to move to economics, move my whole major, try to get credits where I can. And I mean, it was the right choice. I'm very
Yeah,
happy that I did that.
that's great. So after you graduated from New Mexico, what happened?
Yeah, so well, I was working for a defense contracting firm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was a ton of fun, very different from what I do now. But I actually got picked up by Goldman Sachs to go out to their offices in Salt Lake City, and I was there for about a year and a half, I think.
Yeah, Goldman's a great firm. That's definitely a great resume builder.
Yes, so we'll joke as I tell you about my experience that I'm like Thanos, collecting banks like Infinity Stones. But yes, I mean, phenomenal firm, great people, really some of the smartest people I've ever had the pleasure of working with.
What were you doing with Goldman there at Salt Lake City?
So I was a treasury operations analyst, right? So there's all the different lines of business inside of Goldman, and at the end of the day, they all settle their cash transactions across the firm, right? So we provide those services, and so my clients at the time were internal stakeholders inside the bank. And I mean, when I tell you that there were billions, if not trillions, of dollars being settled every day, it was unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen so much money in my life.
What an experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. But I think I felt very passionate about working with clients, kind of leveraging my knowledge to work directly with individuals and institutions. So I actually got picked up by the JP Morgan private bank to move out to San Francisco to join the team there.
Nice. How long were you in San Francisco for?
Oh man, so this was during the pandemic. So a little bit of it was remote work, but it was also the beginning of the come back to office mandates.
Okay.
So I think I was in San Francisco almost 2 years, I think.
Okay.
And I mean,
And,
what a beautiful city. Incredible.
yeah, I'm sure. And there, Carlos, was it your first time, I guess, more of just on your with the role with the client facing?
Yeah, yeah. So I like to say that I was a desk jockey. I was an investment professional. And San Francisco, as you can imagine, is a very new wealth city, a lot of trading activity, a lot of really complex transactions. And so my job was really to take incoming calls from clients, right, who wanted to trade tens of thousands of shares, trade options, trade all sorts of, kind of derivative products and help execute, right? And so as you can imagine, right, for a client of the JP Morgan Private Bank, execution is number one, right? Because that can be the difference between hundreds of thousands of dollars of profits. So I mean, it was a blast. I learned a ton. And again, I mean, San Francisco was the perfect backdrop for that stage of my career.
Yeah. And then you said after that, that's when you moved to DC.
Yeah, yeah. So we came out to DC, doing a similar role for the private bank, but because the clientele, I think between San Francisco and DC is very different, right? So
Yes.
the needs are very different. Their approach to wealth is very different. So the job here was a bit more, like let's think about, yes, let's use derivatives, let's use structures, let's use preferreds, but let's be more thoughtful about the overall tax implications and the approach that we take with our clients.
And that was still with JP Morgan when you moved here.
Yeah. Yep. So I was very lucky that the firm was able to place me inside of basically the same slot here in DC.
And the reason you say you moved here was because your husband got a job here?
Yeah. So Sean, absolutely the better half. He is in the Air Force, and so that was a big motivator for the move here. But I also always wanted to get back to DC, right? I did the fellowship here. It was such a blast, and I've always dreamed of coming back, and I'm very lucky that I like to live here now.
Yeah. How long have you been here in DC for now?
2.5 years. I think we're going on
Okay.
3 years in July.
Very different. What's your experience living in all these different, like you said, from coast to coast, as far as now DC?
DC, I think, is the best of East Coast living and West Coast living. So people here are very nice, right? They're definitely nicer than they are in New York or maybe Chicago, but they're also not as relaxed as they are in San Francisco, right? So in San Francisco or California, like it's very laid back. Like 1 o'clock, the market's closed. People go to the beach, like they go surfing, which is great, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes you want a little bit more hustle, especially early on in your career. And here in DC, like, I mean, such interesting people. Like, you go to a bar, you go to a restaurant, and you meet such fascinating people from all over the world. You walk down the street, you hear all sorts of languages. And so to me, it's the perfect match. Just don't stand on the wrong side of the escalator. You'll get in trouble.
That is true. What made you switch from JP Morgan to Bank of America?
Yeah, I mean, nothing negative to say about JP Morgan, right? Phenomenal people, phenomenal platform. I think we can talk a little bit more about it, but I think that the approach to managing clients' money, right, and building the relationship with your clients is very much fundamentally different, right? It's like a DNA difference, whereas one firm might be more oriented towards selling product, right? Be that
Hmm.
their own products or products from other firms. I think Bank of America, what they do really well is have that team-based consultative approach, right, to working with that client specifically and understanding that client specific needs, right? So JP Morgan, for example, has a call every morning at 8 a.m., to talk about what they should be selling clients on that given day, right? Or that given quarter or whatever the next hot idea is. Whereas here, we don't do that, right? So we're a fiduciary, right? So we're held to the highest legal standard to care for our clients and their assets. But the approach is very much like, hey, like let's sit down, let's work with a portfolio manager, let's work with a tax specialist, let's work with your team of advisors, put together an investment policy that makes sense for you and your goals, and we take the assets and we invest in that way. So there's a very different relationship with our clients. And what I found was for my clients and my prospects, they felt much more comfortable with that approach, right? They felt much more appreciated. And so I'm very lucky to be here. The firm has a phenomenal focus on diversity and inclusion as well, which for me as a gay Latino is very, very important.
Yeah, it sounds like it's more of a consultative advisory role instead of a pushing a product. And I'm not saying that's what they were doing over there, but I definitely understand what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I had some clients that I used to work with who loved that, right? They were like, as soon as you get the list of the top 10 preferreds and the next alternative investment deal, call me immediately. I want to hear about it. But not all clients are like that. And I think, I work with all sorts of clients all over the country. But I have kind of self-selected into working with a lot of diverse individuals, a lot of business owners in the Latino community specifically. And I have found that, Latinos, we like to do business a certain kind of way, right? And I think that the way that we like to do business really aligns with the way Bank of America Private Bank operates.
Yeah, it's so true. It just made me think about right now, one of the deals I'm working with, I sent over a proposal to my client for them to review. It's not long, it's just a few pages. And he was like, hey, can you please come down to my business? And then you can go through every section line by line in Spanish, because the proposal's in English, of course. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, of course. So you send them a text, let's meet tomorrow or whatever. But like you said, it's more face to face, and it's almost, you can say, old school, as far as they just want to just sit down and you go over certain things with them.
Well, and, as is the case with a lot of families, including my own, dad kind of goes out and works in the community, so he picks up English. Mom might not, right? Or maybe, the patriarch of the family doesn't speak English, or, a ton of other, kind of linguistic, cultural barriers. And so having someone who can kind of understand those and speak to those and work through those, I think is critical.
Hmm.
So I think if you look at Bank of America, we put people in place at the commercial bank, the business bank, the retail bank, the private bank, who understand these cultural differences and are happy to work through them. So, like I said, I'm so proud of the work the firm is doing, and I'm happy to be here.
So, Carlos, as a private client advisor, how does your day look like? Is every day the same, or are there certain things that are different, or?
Yeah, well, no 2 days are the same, and so it's never boring. But no, I think my days start pretty early. I'm always meeting with clients, always meeting with prospects. I think capital market activity has started to pick up again, and so I think that our client profile tends to be entrepreneurs, executives, people who have inherited generational wealth. or people who even created generational wealth for the first time, right? They've sold a business. And so when capital markets start to kind of pick up, that's really the genesis for a lot of the wealth creation that happens with our clients. And so I'm always going out, meeting with clients, meeting with our teams. Our approach here is every client has a team of advisors inside the private bank, right? So it's me. So I'm really the quarterback or the glue of the team, right? Make myself sound important. There's a client manager, right, who really handles the day-to-day checking accounts, debit, credit that clients need. There's a portfolio manager who actively manages the investments. And then depending on the situation, right, we might have a trust officer or a wealth specialist, who kind of helps with tax planning or being thoughtful about taxes. And so it's always kind of meeting with the different team members, meeting with clients, meeting with prospects, going to events. I go to a lot of events. And it's a blast. I love it, but it does get a little tiring. So every day is different.
How many events do you go per week or month typically?
So this week was a busy week in particular. I think I'm going to be going to about 6 events. So the Foundation for Preservation of Art and Embassies had an event at the White House Tuesday, and had an event at the State Department yesterday. And the bank is a big sponsor of that. We're a big supporter of the arts.
Okay.
And so we got to go to that, got to go to the White House. So, all the events are, like I said, always a ton of fun.
That's nice. So to become let's say a client of the private bank of Bank of America, any requirements or criteria that you typically like to work with?
Yeah, I think it makes sense for people to engage the private bank, not so much from like I have $10 million of assets, right? Which if you do, absolutely will take you, right? Any private bank will. But I think we really look for a more specific type of profile in our clients, right? So they tend to be young, they tend to be business owners, they tend to be entrepreneurs, corporate executives, right? And we meet them where they are, right? And so I like to tell my clients, if there's a minimum number of assets, if you're there, if you're not there, so long as you're an interesting person and we believe in you and your business, we're willing to bring you in and incubate you and kind of help you kind of get to that point where you're considered, a client of the private bank.
Hmm.
But no, I mean, when I was hired, my mandate was really look like go into the community, find these families, find these individuals, these institutions, and bring them to the enterprise. There's a home for everybody at Bank of America. Might not be the private bank, but I'm more than happy to get everyone situated to where they best belong.
That's great. So it's not really more about assets or net worth. It's just meeting people where they are, as you mentioned.
Exactly, exactly. And like I said, there's a home for everybody here at the bank, and just finding that home is I think half the battle.
What would you say, Carlos, you're most proud of this far in your career?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm very proud of my professional achievements, right? I think, the private bank kind of sits at the pinnacle of banking and what we do. I know the investment banking guys will disagree, but we can agree to disagree there. So where I'm proud of that, I'm also really proud of the work that I do here in the community, which I'd love to talk about that a little bit as well. But because, Latinos, like we sit at every level, right? From, low, median income to high income to very high income. And so I think being able to build an ecosystem for us here in the district is paramount for me.
Yeah. No, you mentioned the community. Please, if you can go into that as far as what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of interesting things in the pipeline, but right now I serve on the board of directors of LEDC, which is the Latino Economic Development Center. So they're a nonprofit organization here in the district. They're a CDFI. For anyone who doesn't know what a CDFI is, it's a community development financial institution. And really their job is to take, government grants, and kind of distribute them to the community and also kind of have their own programming to help grow wealth. And so the Latino is in the name, but I believe about 85 to 95% of their clients come from diverse, disadvantaged communities, but they work with anyone, right? Regardless of ethnicity, gender, sexuality. They treat all their clients with respect, and I'm very proud of the work that they do here in DC.
That's amazing. So you've been on their board now for how long?
Gosh, I feel like it's going on 2 years. It's
Oh,
been a
wow.
little while. Yeah, it's been a little while. But I mean, LEDC is such a storied institution here in DC. So I think kind of in the early 90s, a gentleman was shot by the police here in the district. And there were riots as part of the Latino community, was kind of at a breaking point. And what ended up happening is this group of business owners, entrepreneurs, bankers, other financial professionals kind of got together and said, like we need to form an institution that's really going to help advance our economic goals. And they got funding from the city. I can't remember exactly which organization, but there is a piece inside of the city government that gave them funding, and they've been running ever since, right? So it's been, I think, 35 years in
Hmm.
2026. So
Yeah. That's amazing. You were mentioning earlier as far as your team, and you're almost like the QB, the quarterback of the team.
Mhm.
Is typically I think you mentioned 3 to 5 people. Is that typical, or how
Yeah.
does what does the team consist of?
Yeah, good question. So every client gets a team, right? And so there's, I think of it as almost like putting a puzzle together, right? So like
Hmm.
the client has a specific background, a specific profile. I work with entrepreneurs, for example, who are women-owned businesses, and they have almost completely women-run executive teams. And so for those individuals, having a team of women supporting them is very important, right? So here internally, right, like let's pull, the client manager, the portfolio manager, the trust officer, and let's have them represent the client's values as well, right? So every client gets a team kind of assembled in that way. And that's part of my job, right? Kind of picking the right folks, either personality wise, experience wise, demographics wise. So it's very customized. Everything we do is very customized. There are other kind of specialists that will come in from time to time if it's the right situation. I'll give you an example. So if a client is selling a business, right, and they're going to experience a 10, 15, $20 million or more inflow, that's probably going to carry pretty substantial tax consequences. So we don't do the tax planning, right? We don't offer tax advice, but what we do is be very thoughtful about the way that a transaction is structured. And right, being a Bank of America, we've seen everything, close to everything. So because of that, right, we can kind of give you advice about how you should be thinking about these things. And so in those cases, we'll bring in a wealth strategist who's kind of worked with a lot of clients going through that situation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does definitely.
Mm-hmm. So if a client's interested in, private placements, timber, land, more boutique investments, we also have specialists who help with that as well.
Nice. Carl, from a marketing standpoint, what would you say drives the most traffic as far as, you getting clients, the inflow?
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty even split between the work that I do out in the community and the work that the enterprise does to make sure that if you're a client of the business bank, right, and the business banker thinks you'd be a phenomenal fit for the private bank, right, we make that introduction. Same thing in the other direction, right? Like if I have a client who has a large company, and the client expresses a need for something that the commercial bank does really well, right? We're happy to make that introduction. And so I think the internal and the external network, I think, is really where it comes from.
Would you say most of your clients are, individuals or organizations, whether for profit or nonprofit?
So I think most of my clients are definitely individuals, right? So the private bank is really, I don't want to say we're geared towards, the two-legged person,
Hmm.
but that's really where our core client tends to be. But we also have large institutions as clients. I mean, we have one of the largest philanthropy operations in the country, if not in the world. So those clients also tend to navigate towards us. But again, right, wherever the client is, right, be that institution or individual, we have the ability to bring in the right teammates, right, to make the relationship flourish. And that's what I think is so amazing, right? You don't get that, at a normal bank. And someone said to me the other day, right, it's the difference between like, do you have a bank or do you have a banker? And I think that that's really the key difference, right? Having someone who you can call for anything, who can get you to the right place.
Yeah. So your days must be really full with phone calls and emails and everything.
Yeah. So sometimes I get home and my husband teases me. I just don't want to talk. I just want to be quiet because I spent all day talking. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of talking.
Yeah, it's so funny too. My wife has a similar role where a lot of it's just in the computer or with spreadsheets and very little one-on-one interaction. And I tell her my day's almost the opposite. I'm more just on the phone or in meetings or emails. Um, just like you, just sometimes I just rather just be quiet.
Yeah, well, I think the difference is you have a couple kids. We have two dogs. No
Okay.
kids, but it is in the pipeline. But thankfully, if I want to talk, if I don't want to talk, they love you anyways.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone, Carlos, if they're listening to this and they're like, hey, you know what? I want to go into the banking sector. And I know banking sector is just so large. I mean, there's so many roles and things you can do, but maybe they like what you're doing. They're like, hey, maybe I want to become one day a private client advisor or advise, wealthy families and organizations.
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing that I would advise, that I think the advice that I received as well, is to read as much as possible, right? Like consume as much content, read all the books, read all the articles, right? Like don't hamstring yourself into like, oh, I study this, I study that. I don't really care about anything. Read as much as you can, right? Be as educated as you can, because what I found is when you're kind of engaging with folks, right? If you have something that they also are an expert in or like to talk about, that really opens up the relationship, right? When you show interest in the things that they care about.
Hmm.
So that would be number one. And number two would be to kind of keep an open mind, right? When I worked at Goldman, I think my very first manager had majored in piano, right? Which what a thing to end up at Goldman, right? But if you,
I'm sorry, he majored in piano?
yeah, he
Wow.
did. Yeah. And like, like what, how do you end up at Goldman, right? But
Yeah.
it kind of becomes this, like, if you're a smart, interesting, dedicated person, these big institutions, like they'll look at you, right? And they'll give you the opportunity, right? So you just have to make sure that and I'm sure this is similar to the work that you do. Like you have to really do the groundwork before you get there, right? To show what you can do. And so, it's especially, if anybody younger, I'm always happy to talk to folks about my career, about, any advice as well for their specific situation. So again, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's so true. I remember when I was here, University of Maryland with my econ. I was getting my bachelor's in econ and minor in business Spanish. And then, I found an ad somewhere and then I got an internship at Citigroup Smith Marty. So, I would go to Bethesda and basically I was working with two stockbrokers. Back in the days, they were called stockbrokers. Now, wealth advisors, private client, whatever name, but they were basically pitching product, like you said all day just cold. So my role and the roles of a few other students there that had internship was just cold calling hundreds of phone calls every day, calling all over the country. If it was 6 p.m. East Coast, we'll be calling West Coast, California, Hawaii,
Yeah.
and just pitching preferred or, talking to the stockbroker. And it was so interesting because it was two partners that I was working under, and there was one specifically in charge of the interns. And he was the one that would normally be, well, they both pitched as far as product, right? But there was one specifically that he told me, he was like, most of my investment is not in the stock market. Most of my investment is in commercial real estate. And I was like, interesting. Here you are pitching stocks and bonds or preferreds or whatever, right? And you're telling me most of your investments, your net worth is in commercial real estate. He's like, yeah, I own commercial real estate here in the area. And my partner over here next to me with the office next door, you can see he likes to day trade. He would be in and out of stocks, and his net worth was considerably less than his. But he was a day trader. So he was like, and most of the people were looking to maybe become a financial advisor with them. And he was like, you should consider looking into commercial real estate. And I'm like, I've always thought about that. I've always had an interest in, business, finance, commercial real estate. And he was like, I have a good buddy who I play tennis with in the country club. I'm Latino. There was no country club and nothing like that.
You should
And
start one.
he was like, there's a good buddy who plays tennis with me in the country club. He has his own commercial real estate firm out of Tyson's. You should connect. And then there you go. I was an intern. I went from there to the other, and now I've been in commercial real estate most of my career. But just to say, like, just have doors open. You never know what happens.
Yeah, 100%. And on the commercial real estate piece, right? Like they're like legs of a stool, right? So as your wealth grows, as your experience grows, like you really should make sure that you have, multiple legs of your wealth life, right? Like, so if that means commercial real estate, residential, stocks, bonds, alternatives, I think what the private bank does really well, right, is that we can be very thoughtful about these things, right? Because we're not selling product and we're a fiduciary. We really have to advise you on what's on your best interest, right? And sometimes that is, outside of the purview of the firm.
Yeah. In life and also during our business career, Carlos, we all have setbacks or you can call them failures. Are there any that come to mind right now that you went through? And what'd you learn from that situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of setbacks, I think I've been very lucky that, I feel like my career has kind of steadily climbed
Hmm.
upwards. I think if anything, when I switched, from engineering, which I'd done for years, to economics and finance, I think it was a pretty scary moment, right? Because I'm kind of leaving what I knew. There was an internship lined up with ExxonMobil, right? There was a lot of potential in that career path. But I just knew that it was what I wasn't passionate about, right? And kind of knowing that and accepting that, I knew that in time I wasn't going to succeed in the way that I wanted to, right? Like I told everybody, like self-actualization is critical, right? What if that means career, personally, in your relationship in life? You have to do things that you feel good about that make you want to get up in the morning. Like I joke, like I wake up with a smile every day of my life because every day there's something fun to look forward to, right? Sometimes Sean might find it a little annoying, but it is what it is, right? And so, for anyone in that position, I would say, right, like you have to You have to buy call options on yourself. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to, kind of rise to the occasion.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's so true. Are there any habits you feel that have helped you, whether personally or just on your career? You were just mentioned as far as waking up with a big smile on your face, so it just made me think of that.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky. I do get a fresh coffee from the espresso machine every morning, so that's good. But in terms of habits, I think absolutely. Like, I'm an avid runner, right? Sean and I love to go out for runs. We're going to be running the Army 10 miler on Sunday.
Oh,
Uh, you know,
wow.
I hope other people are going to be there. But again, I think a value my dad instilled in us from very young was read, right? And so, you know, there were a lot of things my dad wouldn't necessarily buy us if we asked for it, but a book or something like that, always happy to. And I think that has translated really well into my professional life, right? Because as research, as the bank, publishes research, as other firms publish their, best thinking, their thought leadership, right? I'm always just crunching through stuff, right? Either on the train, or here in the office or before a meeting. And I think that that's really helpful, right? I think it gives you a very wide open view of what's happening in the world and markets. And that really helps the way that we advise our clients, or at least that I try to.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say is your biggest challenge with your role today at B of A?
Hmm. I think at the end of the day, right, like my role is to kind of help acquire more clients for the enterprise. And I think that the biggest challenge is that there are some really solid competitors in the marketplace, right? I think that over time, as people have become more focused on investing in a certain type of way, it's really raised the bar, right, for the things that a bank or a partner really needs to provide you. And so I think that the biggest challenge is going into the marketplace and saying, look, like this is what I'm doing, this is what these guys are doing, and this is why we're doing is better. But I think I have colleagues or old colleagues across the aisle at these other firms, and I know that we all do good work for our clients. So it's a good challenge to have.
Speaking about goals, I'm sure. So does the bank say we need a certain number of deposits or assets under management, or how does that work?
Good question. So there's no sales quotas, right? There's at least not for my role. There's no commission, no incentive to sell clients product, which I think is
Hmm.
what I love most about my role. Like we said earlier in the call, it's a very consultative, very relationship focused approach, right? Because I mean we've been advising multiple generations of families for over 200 years, right? And the only way you can do that is by having a very advisory type view.
Hmm. That's great. What do you know now, Carlos, that you wish you would have known at the start of your career?
Oh man, you have some good questions.
Thank you.
Um, I I
And
wish,
it could be personally, it can be with your career, it could be anything.
yeah, I think early on in my career, I had a lot of doubt, right? Like, young, Latino, did not come from a wealthy background, and I had a lot of doubt about my ability to do the job. And what I found is that at the end of the day, all that matters is competence and love for what you do, right? So those are things that you can control, right? So I wish I had spent less time worrying about the things I can't control, and more time, focusing on the things that I can control, which eventually worked itself out, and I'm very happy that it did.
Yeah, it's so true with your role. Probably you've seen similar to mine. When I came into commercial real estate, not many people looked like you and me.
Yeah.
Most of the people, maybe in residential real estate, there's a lot more women, there was more minority based, but in commercial, it was more white shoe. You have to have a bachelor's degree at a minimum in order for anyone to just accept you, which I did. I had my bachelor's, but many people didn't look like me. It was mostly 50-plus-year-old Caucasian white men.
Mhm.
And just like you start maybe second guessing. You're like, gosh, is this the right thing? But this is what I want. This is what I like. And in the end, I almost created like a niche because I'm very different. A lot of my clients are maybe first, second generation immigrants, whether they're Latino, whether they're Asian, whether they're African from different countries. But we just related to one another just because we were here in this country, just better life for our family and for ourselves and just the way you communicated. But what you thought was sort of a down, something negative, what came out to be something positive.
100%. And I tell everyone this, like, if you speak Spanish, if you're diverse, if you're from a specific community, like, absolutely leverage that, right? Like, be the person in your community who does like commercial real estate, private banking, retail, investing, whatever. But really use that to your advantage, right? Like, absolutely. I think it is. I feel very lucky to, one, be Latino, and two, to speak Spanish, and three, to be part of the LGBTQ community, right? Because like you said, there is not a lot of people who look like us doing this job. I think that's going to change over time. I think the circle is going to keep getting wider for everyone.
Hmm.
I'm excited about it, right? I'm excited to have this conversation in 20 years and see how different the field looks.
Yeah, that would be great. When you hear the word success, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, I don't think in terms of like dollars and cents or like client numbers. I think in terms of like one, do you feel good about yourself every day, right? Do you feel good about the work that you do? And two, like, are you slowly making progress on your goals, right? So, Sean likes to joke, but I do like to quote, the Stoics every once in a while. But a man's greatest empire is his own mind, right? And so, if you can really have that relationship with yourself, I think that that is a foundation for success. Don't always hit the mark on that, but I think that that's one of my personal goals, right? To kind of continue kind of building that relationship with myself and kind of making progress on goals, be that professionally or fitness or whatever. Hopefully, I can make it under a 7 minute mile in the next 12 months. But I mean, we'll see, right? We'll see when we get there.
Yeah, I agree. You have to continue to push yourself. That's the only way.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it's we live in such a beautiful, amazing, connected world. America, greatest country in the history of the world, right? I mean, the opportunity is unlimited. So I'm excited to be here at this specific moment in time.
Did you have any big mentors? And if so, what'd you learn from them?
Oh my gosh, yes, like that's something else. I've been so lucky to have such incredible mentors and role models, right? Be that either inside the bank, inside big institutions, and really, I think what I learned is to be thankful, kind of for the people who came before us, right? Who did so much heavy lifting that we don't have to, right? And be that heroes, in the equal rights movement, be that racially or gender or sexuality wise. I mean, there's so much to be thankful for. And I think attention to detail, kind of remembering the small things like, I mean, I could go on for hours and hours, right? But that's true. I've been very thankful to have incredible mentors.
That's great. Coming to an end here soon, Carlos. What does the next 5 years look like for you? What are you most excited about?
I'm so excited to see kind of the firm's focus on, Hispanics, Latinos, the LGBTQ community, diverse communities continue to grow, right? We just published a report, right? I think I can't remember exactly which division inside the bank did, but Latinas in particular contributed $1.3 trillion last year to GDP, like trillion with a T. And that's just Latinas, right? So if you put Latinos in the country together, we're one of the largest economies in the world, right? And
Hmm.
I think it's only going to continue to grow. I think our families' wealths are going to continue to grow. I think our contributions to the business and social community are going to continue to grow. And I'm excited, right? I think it's a really exciting time to be Latino here in
Yeah,
America.
I agree. I saw that. I think it was in CNBC. As far as I think we're third after behind India or something as far as the Latinos in the U.S.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, my favorite thing to do is go to events, and I'll meet young Latina business owners in particular, and I'll ask them, like, what do you need, right? Like, what do you need to continue growing your business? Is it connectivity? Is it credit? Is it, advisory, like services? Like, tell me what you need, and we'll find you the right people, right? Because I find it so empowering and so beautiful to kind of be able to work with these folks and help them take their businesses to the next level, help advise them through a transaction. I mean, that's what I'm telling you. Like, I wake up every day with a smile on my face because it's really important work and it's really incredible work that we get to do here inside the firm.
I love that. Carlos, when you're not busy working, what do you like to do for fun in your free time?
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of that, unfortunately. But no, like I said, Sean and I love to go hiking. We love to go running. We love to travel. We're going to be in Vienna at the end of November. So Sean and I have been together for 8 years, but we got married in July. And so finally taking the honeymoon trip. So we love to travel. We love to, kind of see different parts of the country. Um, and I mean, yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of time,
Yeah,
but we love to eat. So if anyone has good restaurant recommendation, we are always open ears.
nice. So the honeymoon that's coming up in November, it's in Vienna?
Yes, sir. In
Okay.
Austria.
Oh, beautiful. How long are you going for?
We're gonna be gone for a week.
Okay.
And part of that is Sean is a huge fan of the sound of music. So apparently there's a tour booked. We're gonna stop at every stop that was important to the movie. So wish me luck.
Nice. You mentioned running and hiking. Do you have a favorite go-to trail in the city?
Yeah, so we live here in DC. We live in Navy Yard. So we take Capitol South, you cross the Frederick Douglass Bridge, and then you just have like a straight shot all along the Anacostia Waterway.
Oh,
And I mean,
beautiful.
it's beautiful over there, especially in the spring and the summer. You cross back over 395, you take, what is it, I Street, I think, or something,
Hmm.
uh, and you end up at Starbucks. So it's exactly 3.1 miles. So it's a 5K every weekend.
A great way to end it with Starbucks.
Exactly, exactly. It's not a promotion for Starbucks, but I think I go every day. That's my bad habit.
Hopefully they're inclined to B of A. If not, they should.
Yes, exactly. If Starbucks is listening, this is your notice.
Yeah. Carlos, thank you so much for joining me today. If you want to learn more about you and what you're doing at Bank of America, where can they go to, please, to find out more?
Yeah, so they can go to the private bank website. They can look up my name and they can find me there. I'm also happy to share my email and kind of corporate cell phone if that would be helpful.
Sure.
So email is carlos.talamante. I can spell it. I don't know if that helps, but it's at bofa.com.
And that's Talamante.
Yes, sir. And the
Yes.
cell phone number is 202-860-7643. People can call or text anytime.
Awesome. Carlos, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Otto. I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to talk to your folks.
Of course. Take care.
Bye bye.